Hi, I'm Joey Gough. I'm a front-end developer. I've been a front-end developer for about 5 years. And yeah, I've worked with React, I've worked with Angular, I've worked a bit with Vue, and I've also worked with React Native. In terms of GraphQL, at my current company, we use Apollo Client. But previously, I had worked for like 2 to 2.5 years on a project where we used Relay with Expo. And it was much my first introduction into Relay, and I really enjoyed it, and I really took to it. Sorry, it's my first introduction into GraphQL, I should say. And I actually thought it was a great place to start for GraphQL. Has anyone used Relay before? You have? Nice, but not a lot. Have people used Apollo Client? Yeah, probably more. Yeah, so I'm just going to just talk about what I learned while using Relay, and some of the key, like some of the defining characteristics of it. So yeah, I just was like, because I know that people here are of different experience, so I just wanted to just do like one slide on like what is GraphQL. And yeah, so GraphQL is just like a system whereby the front end can tell the back end what data it wants. And that's in contrast to like traditional REST APIs that are a bit more rigid. You can have like filter params and query params to change your data a bit, but you still need like kind of bespoke endpoints for particular views. Whereas with GraphQL, you just have one endpoint, and with that one endpoint, you just send your query, and you get what you want, basically. So a lot of libraries in React are made for GraphQL. Look like this. It's like a hook, and it's like use query. You pass in a GraphQL tag node, and it gives you your data. And like the Prisma Labs GraphQL relay hooks, GraphQL hooks, Apollo client, like they all look more or less like this. And yeah, in this example, you would get your name. Incidentally, when this happens, what normally happens is a server will look at your authorization token and figure out who you are from that. And that's how usually the me and the context of who is the requester starts to happen. Okay, so what is Relay? Yeah, it's a library. So Relay is just one option you have if you're working with GraphQL as a library to choose. It's for managing fetching and managing GraphQL data with React. So Relay was created at Meta, formerly Facebook, and obviously like that was the same place where they created React and they created GraphQL, and this is a library that they also created for integrating GraphQL with React. So it's definitely an interesting thing to look at, and it's just interesting to look at some of the choices that they made and why they did it. Yeah. If you want to use Relay, like you can't, as a front-end developer, it's not as easy as just deciding you want to use Relay, because you need a backend that's Relay compliant. So the backend has to have like a couple of, in order for you to start using Relay. And there's two major assumptions that Relay lists on their website that your backend server has to implement. One is that it has to implement cursor-based pagination. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes what cursor-based pagination is, for those of you that don't know. And also your objects have globally unique identifiers. So if you're using Relay, you have this concept of a globally unique identifier for all of your objects. So everything in your data structure, like users, businesses, orders, items, they're all nodes. They all implement the node interface. And the node interface just has one field, and it's an ID. And so these IDs are unique. It's not like unique to one table, it's unique across the whole application. And yeah, that's something that's important because it allows Relay to do like updating. When it gets new information, it allows it to update what it has to update. So Relay, it consists of a compiler, the Relay runtime, which is just Relay when you import from it. And you need a Babel plugin. If you want to use this with Expo, you just have to edit your Babel RC, and in your list of plugins, just add a Relay to your list of plugins. Cool. So yeah, so how to do queries with Relay. So people have used Apollo, and in Apollo, like you would just write your query like this and say use query. Yeah, so this is what like a GraphQL query looks like. You're defining your ID, you're passing your ID in, you fetch. So when you load this, you have to pass an ID to the load function, and then we've got a fragment here, and I'll go into fragments in a few minutes. But the best practice with Relay is that they say that you should, or where possible and where it makes sense, you should use a query loader to preload your queries. So I'm going to kind of jump back and forth between slides a bit here. So you use this query loader, and it gives you three things. It's like a query ref, that's like a pointer to your query, and when there is data, that points to your data. This load query function, and dispose query. So this use effect, just on unmount, it just disposes of the query. And so in this scenario, we want to see, so this button says we want to see the business overview. So when we say show more, sets expanded to true and loads the query. The suspense is going to show us the activity indicator. And then when the query ref actually has data, it's going to render this business overview component, which is this. And then this uses a use preloaded query hook. So it's a few extra steps on top of, the use query. And yeah, so this was a query. And just to point out that on this owner, we have like a user, and the owner gets passed down and the user gets passed into this profile. And yeah, I'm just going to show like what fragment components are as well. So I don't know, I hope I explained that use query loader. So you preload the queries, and it's meant to be for optimization, I guess. So like back here, you can call load query with a new ID, and it would just change, I guess, what's in here. And then use preloaded query. So that's that. So this was the fragment that was spread back here on the profile user. And this is it here. So this is like a use fragment hook. And yeah, so it knows based on the context of like the GraphQL, the way it goes from business to owner to user, it knows because of the context of where you're rendering this, whose name and whose profile picture you're supposed to be getting, or it's supposed to be getting. And the idea of these fragments is that the components are decoupled and like independent and reusable. So you don't have to import this fragment anywhere. You just have to spread it, which is different than in Apollo client, where, as I understand it, you do have to import the fragment at the query where you're spreading it. Whereas with GraphQL, with Relay, you don't have to do that. You just spread the fragment and the compiler will just figure it out for you. Yeah, so that's fragment containers. So fragments, yeah, this is just an example of showing how like your fragment components can be reused. So you could have a basket, and the basket has a creator. So let's say with this profile, you have like the name and image. If the basket has a creator, you might want to show the name and image there, but you could also have like a business overview component and the owner of the business. You might want to, so it's just an example of how the fragments are reusable. These fragments can also be spread on subscriptions and mutations. And so if someone edits this profile component, they add like, I don't know, like the age or something, then this subscription is, the definition of this subscription is automatically updated. And because of the globally unique identifiers of the node objects, when the Relay environment receives new information with an ID and the fields are different than the fields it has in the store already for that ID, it will update in all the React components. I hope that made sense. And also with a mutation, it will optimistically update the store while it goes and makes the mutation. So yeah, that's that. Cursor-based pagination. Yeah, I'll take a breath for a second. Has anyone used cursor-based pagination before? Yeah, okay. You haven't? Okay. Graph, yeah, so these like nodes and edges are like buzzwords in like GraphQL and in, yeah, but basically like a graph is a data structure of nodes and edges, where nodes have the globally unique identifiers, like I was saying before. Like these nodes might not necessarily all be of the same type. They could be a user, it could be an order, it could be a business. And then these edges between them are sort of important. So this nomenclature, this naming is important. So yeah, anyway. Yeah, so this node here, for example, it has 4 connections. So if I ask this node like how many connections, or if I said to this node, I want to see your connected nodes, you might think that the way to implement this is to like, it'll be like, okay, well, here's an array of my connected nodes. But that's not what Relay does. What Relay does is it actually gives you the list of the arrows. So yeah. And so these arrows are a list of edges, because the edges are the lines, right? And I believe that the reason that they do this is because they can give attributes then to the relationship between something. Like if you have friends on a social network, then these lines could have weights and how connected you are to these other people. So like this could be a really weak edge, this could be a really strong edge. So that's why they add this extra layer to. Yeah, so cursors are like individual pointers. Just within the array, the nodes are just also objects. Yeah, cool. So yeah, I'm sorry about this slide. It's such a mess, but you know. Yeah. So anyway, so if I wanted to ask this node like, give me your connected nodes, the Relay way of doing it is you say I want the first 3 nodes, and you say after null because it's at the top of your list, and yeah, it's going to give you the first 3 nodes. And we also get this page info like has next page, has previous page, start cursor, end cursor. And this is a part of the Relay spec. So this is what I was saying, like you can't just pick it up and start using Relay because you need to have your backend implementing this as well. So you need to have buy-in from your backend developers. So anyway, if I render these 3 rows of a table and I want to go to the next page, what I do is I take the last cursor in the list, cursor 3, and I put it into the after field. So then I'm saying like, okay, give me the first 3, but after that cursor, and that's how you'll be getting the second page. So you see like first 3 after cursor 3, and it's giving you this one has previous pages true, has next pages false. And yeah, so that's what like cursor-based pagination looks like. Cool. So to implement this in Relay, this is, I actually like screenshot some code and I just changed some of the names a bit. So a connection is obviously like a list of items. And so how do you render a list of items in React Native? A flat list. Well done. Okay, so these decorators, the argument definitions are important. Count and cursor. So the count is going to be used for the first and cursor is after. Refetchable and connection, they're in the docs. These just have to be unique, and sometimes you have to use them if you need to like manually go in, and if you have to actually write code to go in and edit a connection for some reason, then you would need these strings. But in a pure case, you just need these to be kind of unique. So here this is a fragment. Like before we were fetching like name, profile picture. Well, imagine it could be like friends. So it's a list of connections, or a list of edges. So you say after the cursor, give me the first n. Give me the list of edges, give me their cursor. And then this is another fragment. So if you imagine like in a flat list, it's like a list of components. And so every list item can now define its own data requirements. And it's like a fragment component, like I showed you like 7 slides ago. So that's what that would be. So once you have your fragment written like this, you use pagination fragment from Relay. You pass it the fragment, you pass it the fragment ref, which is just the parent QL object. And the load next function, it knows what it has to do is it has to get the end cursor and it has to pass it into the after field. It just works. And you just pass in the amount you want to load next, and it knows it has to get the last cursor and put it into the after field. Yeah, so this is a flat list, obviously from React Native. You just pass it in the edges, which are just a list. You pass it at the render item just to extract the node, And you remember, like we have the fragment spread list item data. Well, this is going to be the key for that fragment. Yeah. So on end reached, when you reach the end, when you're scrolling and you reach the end, on end reach, it just says, do I have next? If I have next, okay, I'll just load the next 10, and you can just scroll for ages. And then the refresh control is when you're at the top of the list and you want to drag down to refresh. It's just a refetch, and these functions are all just destructured off the use pagination fragment. And there's a lot more functions and like that can be destructured off this hook as well that I haven't listed here. But I just kind of wanted to show how nice it can be to just like make an infinite scroll list with drag down to refresh. It's kind of, I don't know, kind of neat. Okay, is this going to work if I go like this? I'm going to do live coding. Okay, I want to talk to you about type safety and testing. So if people have used Apollo, they might have actually seen this before. Is that too zoomed in? Too zoomed out? It's okay. Yeah. So if people have used Apollo, they might have seen this before with some of the Apollo tools. But yeah, here's like an example of a fragment component. So this data type country is here. This is the type here. So I got like name, native, phone. So if I come back in here, if I want to use like the name of the, then I got like this. Oh shit, this is so hard. Okay. I add it there. Yep. So I ran the compiler, and the compiler makes these generated directories. You should never be editing these. The compiler makes these. And so you see what I've done here is I added the name, and I ran the relay compiler, and it's updated these automatically generated files. And one of these types here, this one here, we can import that into our file. And by doing that, then our thingy knows that we have data dot, and it knows then that we have like whatever, what was it, name? Yeah, sorry. So yeah, so that's type safety in that. And I wanted to also show the support that Relay has for testing. So it has this Relay test utils package, and it's got these two really useful things you can take out of it: create mock environment and mock payload generator. So this is a bit of plumbing you have to do. It's not the best. Like it's not the nicest. It's a little bit of a setup, but once you do it once or twice, you can kind of copy and paste. So basically, we're rendering this fragment component I was just showing you, and so once it renders, it's creating like almost like a post request, because it's posting GraphQL data. And so this is the environment that was made by the create mock environment function, and we just say resolve the most recent operation. Okay, and how to resolve it is when you get the operation, use the mock payload generator to just generate mock data. So what I'm doing here is I'm just dumping the JSON into a snapshot file just to show you what it's generating. So here you can see it's generated mock value for field name, mock value for field phone, because we were querying those, and we just said this mock payload generator just generate fake data, and so it just put these fields in. But what you can also do is, so I just wrote two tests here just to show. You can pass a second argument to this generate function, and the second argument is, I think they call it like a resolver. And so what you do is you take this, the name of this has to match the name of the node type, and you say return these fields, and basically it will then just return those fields for you like that in your tests. And if you only add one and you omit everything else, it'll just mock the rest of them, and it will just give you the one that you specified for. I think it's got pretty good support for testing at Relay. I think it does anyway. Yeah. So that was that, and yeah. So just to summarize, I guess I'll just read this. Queries and fragments are defined using the Relay runtime. GraphQL tag queries are preloaded for optimization. Fragments are spread on queries. Fragments are also spread on subscriptions and mutations to be automatically updated. The Relay compiler validates all your GraphQL and generates types. And Relay compliant APIs with global object identifiers, CRISP-based pagination, they allow you to use Relay hooks really powerfully. So that was that. So I'm finished.
Really interesting talk. I've never seen Relay before, so it was like cool. Like on most of the GraphQL or like GraphQL projects that I've worked on, they've almost exclusively been Apollo, so it's interesting to see some other solution. I'm curious to see if you've looked at or used Apollo and what like the trade-offs are between Relay and Apollo, because some of the syntax on Relay I found was a lot more like complex, and it seemed like if you're implementing the cursor-based pagination on the back end as well, it's a lot of investment that you need to put into it. So I'm just like sitting here trying to think like what is the use case for it, and when would it make sense to use Relay as opposed to Apollo?
Yeah, well, the use case I think is if you want those edges, and so like if you have to represent characteristics of the relationship between things. Yeah, so that would be like your absolute, we need Relay moment. If you really needed to it was important for you to be able to characterize the relationship between them, not just that they have a relationship. I guess if I was to make a case for it, it would be like the use fragment hook in Relay. It doesn't exist in Apollo. You just import fragments from around the place, and you just have to like drill your. That's my experience. I've only written like a bit with Apollo, and yeah, I only have shallow experience with Apollo, to be honest. So I don't want to say anything. Yeah.
I have a question about type safety. So can you, because types are generated, so can you use them server side also, and just do something to reuse types from both sides?
Use the type server side?
Yeah.
I've never done it. But if you had a TypeScript backend, I don't know. Yeah, I guess you could change the output directory of the Relay compiler, but yeah, I don't know why you would do that.
So workflow would be defining them in front end.
Yeah, so you get the schema from the backend. So with like a GraphQL endpoint, you perform what they call introspection, and that's when at the same endpoint that you send your queries to, you can introspect, and there's like CLI tools that you can introspect, and you can get the whole schema, and then you generate your TypeScript types off the schema. So the workflow is that you get the schema from the backend and you generate your types off the schema. So you're kind of getting them from the backend. Thanks everybody. Thank you.